Go. So let's get going with no further ado. Matt Audia is the founder of Audia Physical Therapy, and he has a really great presentation for us here today. He's going to be talking about he's going to be talking about the optimal motor learning theory, restore automatic movement patterns. You know, this is going to be a great presentation. We always appreciate Matt's insight. You know, I sometimes say, you know, somewhat, you know, seriously that, you know, Matt is a physical therapist and he's highly skilled, but he also talks about sort of the psychological approach to rehabilitation. And so I love that. That he brings that approach in because it's very individualized, right? And so Matt really takes that approach to working with his patients. So with no further ado, Matt, I'm sure you can introduce your topic a little bit better than me, but thank you so much for spending a little bit of time here with us this morning.
So thanks again for letting me talk to you here today about restoring automatic movement. Talk to you about that, and we're back on talking about who can benefit from this. Obviously, people with stroke, traumatic brain injury, and people with neurological disorders can do very well by learning to restore that automatic movement and moving easier. But family members and caregivers, we can learn to cue better. We can learn to help people to do this easier. Coaches and athletes, we can change the way we train so that things become easier and more automatic. And medical professionals, well, we can adapt our approach. We can do the same thing with slight adaptations to get better results. And so welcome to my passion. As I said before, I'm a doctor of physical therapy with over 16 years of experience working in physical therapy, specializing in patients with stroke and traumatic brain injury. I have experience in almost every setting of stroke rehabilitation from Boston to San Diego. That's everything from ICU, PCU, TCU, acute care, acute rehab, long-term acute care, home health, skilled nursing facilities, outpatient orthopedics, and outpatient neuro. I have over 1,500 hours of continuing education, and I'm an advanced trained neuro-IFRA therapist. For those of you who don't know what neuro-IFRA is, it's an advanced approach for getting the best outcomes from a patient with a stroke or traumatic brain injury. And I'm also owner and lead therapist here at Audia Physical Therapy in Carlsbad, California. We're an outpatient neurological physical therapy clinic specializing in working with patients with a stroke, traumatic brain injury, and neurological disorders. And today, I have a pretty ambitious topic I want to share with you. Today, I want to talk about automatic movement. What is it and how do we characterize it? We're going to learn about the optimal motor learning theory and how it can help to create ideal conditions for learning, engagement, and performance. We're going to learn how the brain actually responds to these automatic and, to these ideal conditions, and how we can use these practical applications to adapt what we're doing to make it more automatic. And lastly, we're going to touch on something called dual task training, which can help to further push these tasks and these movements into the automatic stage. And so what is automatic movement? Well, simply stated, it's the ability to move without occupying significant attention to the details required. And it has three specific characteristics. One is fluid, smooth movement, not boxy, rigid, uncoordinated movements. It has a low cost of attention. When something has a low cost of attention, it frees up our attention and our focus to deal with other things. And it has a high frequency of reflective movement corrections. Think about when you're walking, these would be the small little corrections like balance reactions, or the things that you don't even notice are happening to help you to achieve whatever it is you're trying to do. And so to make a task automatic, we need to do two things. We need to not only create ideal training conditions for performance and learning, but we need to train in a manner that decreases the attentional cost of that task. And that's where the optimal motor learning theory comes in. This has been researched and proven for over 2 decades with hundreds of studies, mostly by two very talented researchers, Gabriel Wolf and Rebecca Luthwaite. It stands for optimizing performance through intrinsic motivation and attentional learning. And it's got a pretty simple recipe. There's 1 part attentional learning, 2 parts motivation. Today, we're going to talk about each of these aspects, what they do, and how we can use them. So strap in, pay attention, because when we're talking about attention, it pays to notice what we're thinking about. Are we focusing internally or are we focusing externally? When we're focusing internally, we're focusing on our body movement or our position. And when we have an external focus, pretty simple, we're basically just focusing outside of our body. We're focusing on the effect of the movement or the goal. So if I'm focusing internally on walking, I might be thinking about bending my knee, lifting my toes. But if I have an external focus, I might just say, walk to the mark. If I'm focusing on throwing a dart internally, I might be focusing on how I'm standing, maybe bending and straightening my elbow as I release the dart. Whereas if I'm focusing externally, I might just think, hit the dartboard. While the difference between an internal focus and an external focus might seem pretty simple, the difference in how it affects us is tremendous. You see, when we use an internal focus, it actually increases the amount of unnecessary muscle activity, sometimes referred to as noise. These are muscles that don't need to be used. They cause discoordination, uncoordinated movements, and make us boxy and rigid. It increases co-contraction. That's when the muscles on both sides of the joint turn on, causing more rigidity and then a decrease in fluid movement. And it increases the attentional cost of the activity, sometimes screwing us up and decreasing our capacity to pay attention to other things. Conversely, when we use an external focus, it improves the three things we just talked about for automatic movement. It improves our frequency of movement corrections and fluid movement, and it decreases our attentional cost, freeing up that capacity to pay attention to other things. But most importantly, an external focus improves performance and learning. And those are the two most important linchpins here. Not just learning, but long-term learning. It can improve balance, force, accuracy, velocity. Using an external focus can actually help us decrease our perception of how hard we're working. Because we move more efficiently, it can decrease our oxygen consumption and even decrease our heart rate. And it can improve sport-specific form. And amazingly, because an external focus helps our brain to align with our body, it helps us to have more efficient movement preparation, initiation of that movement, and execution. And so if it's so great, how do we use it? How do we apply this? Well, there's a bunch of different ways we can use it. First off, we can simply just cue the task goal. We can, instead of saying open your hand and grab the door and turn the handle, we can simply say open the door, push the handle down, walk over there, hit the dartboard. We can use a target. We can lay a target out and simply say walk to the mark. In a study on jumping, it was actually found that instead of asking a participant to jump as far as you can, they laid out a cone and said, jump as close as you can to this cone. Surprisingly, the people who had the target jumped farther. And targets are interesting because the distance of the target to you actually matters. You see, a novice performer or a beginner will do better focusing on a closer target than an expert performer or somebody with a higher skill level. That means if I'm trying to teach you to focus on throwing a dart at the dartboard, a novice performer might do better focusing on the path of the dart to the dartboard, whereas somebody with more experience might do better by just saying, hit the bullseye or hit the 20 right there. In bowling, a novice performer might do better focusing on the path of the ball towards the pins, whereas somebody with more experience might do better just saying, hey, I want you to hit the ball. I want you to target those pins right there. We can use a metaphor or an analogy. Like if we're golfing, simply saying, move the golf club like a pendulum. We can do the same thing for walking. Let your leg release like a pendulum. If we're talking about upright posture, I can ask you to stand like you're hiding behind a tree, hiding from your nephew or my 2-year-old daughter right there who's watching. There's a great study on basketball where they asked basketball players to finish their shot like they're reaching into a cookie jar. This allows the wrists to snap and causing the rotation of the ball for a more accurate basketball shot. We can use an external point of reference. So instead of simply asking someone to roll over in bed, we can ask them to push the floor with their feet to roll over in bed. Instead of stand up tall, we can say push the crown of your head to the ceiling. And we can even put tape markers or stickers on our body parts so that we can transition from an internal to an external focus. You see, they did this with gymnasts. They put stickers on their chest and they asked them to finish their rotation with the sticker pointing in a certain direction. The group that had stickers on their body and paid attention to the sticker did better than the group that simply said, finish facing in this direction. If I'm in therapy, I may put stickers on people's shoes and say, instead of stand over top of your foot, I may ask them to focus on standing over top of the sticker. This transitions that focus from internal to external and gives us all the benefits that we just talked about. You can use a metronome. And for those of you who don't know what a metronome is, it's a device used for in musicians for keeping tempo and keeping beat. You can download one on your phone for free, or you can just find it on the internet. And using a metronome and asking the person to focus on stepping on the beat while walking can help to alter weight shift timing and improve walking symmetry while keeping that focus external. Because an external focus can decrease our exertion or how we feel, how hard we feel we're working, we can use it to get more reps during exercise and either speed up or slow down our exercise. We can refer to our body part as something else. And this is really important when we're talking about quality. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't want you to just get better and get function. I want to see you moving with a great quality of movement. So that way you don't get hurt later on and you have long-term success. So sometimes we have to refer to the pelvis. Well, that would be internal, focusing on that. So I might change the name to a kayak paddle. I might say to think about your pelvis like it's a kayak paddle and ask you as you're walking to grab the water in front of you and pull it back behind you. This allows for that counter rotation of your body. If I'm looking to help with alignment, I might ask you to line up your kayak paddle over top of your shoes or even your stickers. There's a great study done with volleyball players where they were asked to bump the ball off a straight platform, and another group was asked to bump the ball off straight arms. The group that focused on straight platform instead of straight arms, not only was more accurate, but they were more accurate the next day and the day after that, and even when they backed up. That means it not only improves that immediate performance, but it improves how they learned to be accurate and bump that ball. And lastly, we can vary the activities done because it's not about doing one exercise over and over again. It's about doing multiple related exercises to help reinforce that external focus and enhance our skill level. And that's a lot. So let's go over it. First off, to use an external focus, we can cue the goal, not the movement. We can use a target, any target we like, remembering that novices do better with a closer target, whereas experts might do better with a farther target. We can use a metaphor or analogy. Remember, release your shot like you're reaching your hand into the cookie jar. You can use an external reference point. Remember the stickers on our body. You can use a metronome to transition our tempo to an external focus. We can change the name of the body part like a kayak paddle over the shoes or a straight platform instead of straight arms. And we can vary the related activities so that we keep reinforcing that external focus. Simply stated, an external focus helps us to actually get a higher skill level in a shorter period of time. And that's only one part of this recipe. The next part, we start to get into motivation. When we talk about motivation, the first topic here is autonomy. Autonomy defined as a sense of control over your situation. And the easiest way to create that sense of control is to give people a choice, because choice creates that sense of autonomy. This young gentleman right here made a choice in this outfit and that mustache, and I think I just found my Halloween costume. Autonomy has so many different benefits. Among them, improved performance and learning, enhanced processing of task errors. That means when we make a choice, our brain actually processes our errors with less attention to them and more efficiently. We can get increased self-efficacy, which is a fancy word for the competence and confidence that we feel. We can improve our attentional focus, our positive affect, and even enhance our expectations for future success. It decreases our anxiety and increases the meaning of the activity to the participant because they've made a choice in it. It increases muscular efficiency, and most importantly, it increases the dopamine response in our brain. Here's where we get into the science and what it actually does to our brain. What is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's released in our brain, and it's responsible for the science inside our brain that actually helps to change and help us to perform and learn better. You see, dopamine has many roles depending on when it's released and where it's released in our brain. Among them, performance, learning, voluntary movement, motivation, attention, just to name a few. But when we're talking about movement, It depends on when and where dopamine is released. And when dopamine is released before our movement, it helps to regulate that movement. When we make a choice, dopamine is released in our brain before we move. That helps to prepare our motor system for action, producing faster reaction times and more fluid movement. And when it's released after the movement, it helps strengthen our memory and our learning. That helps to stamp that in our brain so that we can keep it for later. It does this structurally through something called neuroplasticity, which is the changes in synaptic connections in the neurons in our brain. It does this functionally by connecting spatially distinct neural networks in our brain to fire in a coordinated manner to help us achieve that goal. And because of that change, it helps to improve the subsequent performances with prepping tasks, priming, and by enhancing our memory. Dopamine is what we're after. That's what we're looking for. That is the change in the brain, and that is what neurological therapy is all about. And when does it surge? Well, it surges, like we said, when a choice is made, but it also surges after a success or rewarding experience. Amazingly, though, it actually surges in anticipation of a successful or rewarding experience before. It surges when we have a positive emotional response. And that's why dopamine gets a lot of credit for happiness, being the happy part of our brain. And it even surges after a near miss in a meaningful activity. That means if we grade our activities well enough, and it's challenging enough and meaningful enough to us, that when we miss and we know that we can do it, we get that dopamine surge and it helps us to perform better the next trial. That's important. That's what we're looking for. And so dopamine helps us to improve our performance. It changes the structures of our brain through neuroplasticity, and it changes how they connect, and it helps to improve our learning and our memory for the next time. And so using choice is obviously pretty important. How do we use it? Well, make a choice. We can choose the frequency of our tasks and demonstrations. We can choose when we want to use an assisted device, how we'd like to receive feedback, or even which side of the body to practice first. And here's the amazing part. We don't actually have to choose something that directly relates to the task. Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Dr. Audia. You're telling me that if I pick the color of the ball, red or blue, and I get the choice, that means that I could actually perform better when given the choice, when if somebody just hands me a color? Yeah, that's what the research suggests. The research actually has proven that simply picking a color makes a difference. Picking the order of the activities that you want to do them in, or even picking the location of your practice. Mr. Jones, would you like to practice in this room or this room? Because he made that choice, it actually improves his performance and he gets those benefits. In one study, simply choosing the pictures that you see in a treadmill and the order with which you see them helped improve speed and decrease effort and oxygen consumption. So how many choices? Well, the general guidance is that we want to start with less and increase gradually over time. We got to keep in mind that too many choices can actually lead to choice overload, decreasing motivation and satisfaction. Let's be honest, anybody that's walked into a restaurant and opened a 14-page menu with over 100 things on it has been overwhelmed. That's why we like menus with relatively few things on them, maybe say 5 to 10 things. But everyone's different, so we have to gauge our response. We want to avoid being open-ended. What do you want to do today? How many reps would you like to do? How far would you like to walk? Let's give a range. And when we give a range, we want it to be within a range of benefit. If I want Mr. Jones to lift a certain amount of weight today, I might say, Mr. Jones, pick a weight between 3 and 6 pounds. That's what we'll do today. If I'd like to see Mr. Jones walk at least 100 feet, I may pick a target 100 feet away and then one beyond it. I might say, Mr. Jones, do you want to walk to the tree or the car beyond that? And it's okay if you already made the choice for somebody, because asking for their opinion may reduce that defensive or anxious reaction. Hey, we're going to walk to the tree today. You okay with that? Or do you want to walk farther? This one is particularly amazing to me because it turns out that just changing a couple words in how we say something can actually change our brains and change the way that we perform and learn. Simply changing what we say from you must, or I want you to, or you need to do that, to I suggest, you may want to, let's try, or feel free to. can increase the choice perception. You see, the words on the left actually create a feeling of a control, are actually controlling language and can create controlling situations in our brain. That increases a stress hormone known as cortisol to be released in our brain. And when that's released in our brain, it can interfere with that ever important dopamine, that thing that we're looking to get to release so that we can move and learn better. So changing these language, changing your language and choosing your words is incredibly important. So remember, to create a sense of autonomy, we can use choice as a tool. The content doesn't really seem to matter, and we want to use a beneficial range. Start with less and increase more over time. And remember that changing a couple words from "you need to" "let's try" can really matter. Remember, we're not giving people a choice to make them happy. Happiness is a byproduct. We're using choice to change the brain and actually help people to perform and learn better and be more automatic. That's the goal. And what happens when we start to expect a higher level of performance and success? Well, that's the last part of the recipe, and that's called enhanced expectations. Enhanced expectancies is really just expecting a better level of performance the next time you do something or right before you do it. And it has an amazing amount of benefits. Among them, improved automaticity, performance and learning, confidence, self-efficacy, task enjoyment. Don't forget that dopamine release. And it can decrease concern and nervousness about our ability. So how do we enhance people's expectations for success? Well, we can use measurement as a tool. We can use time, distance, accuracy, whatever seems to be important to that person, because objectively quantifying progress can help people to understand they're getting better and give them more confidence for success in the future. We can clearly define success. And this is incredibly important because it turns out that our perception of success is actually more important than actual success. This has been proven. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say we finish an activity and I think Mr. Jones did great. And we sit down, I said, "Mr. Jones, you did great on that." And he sits and I say, "How do you think you did?" Well, he stops and he thinks about it for a second and he says, "Well, not very well." I say, "Why?" "Well, I caught my foot there, or my step wasn't perfect over there, or I kind of hunched a little bit." Now, because he doesn't perceive that success, he doesn't get those benefits. He doesn't get that dopamine surge, and his memory and his learning are not affected as well as they could be. So the perception of success, when we actually perceive that success, gives us those benefits. So we need to make sure that we clearly define what is success. If you step here, that is successful. And sometimes we need to have liberal definitions of that. That's when we get into grading activities. When we get into grading activities, instead of stepping on a small target, you can use a larger target to start. We can step on a wider line instead of a smaller line, or use a larger circle first. This is where in many different clinics, you'll see in big words on the wall, first success, then progress. That's because we want to get that enhanced expectation for success. Instead of walking on a narrow line, I can use a fatter line, but clearly define what is success. Do I want the middle of the foot on there, or is any part of the shoe touching the line okay? When sidestepping, I might ask somebody who has difficulty targeting, and I might ask them to say, sidestep on the line, and as long as any part of your shoe touches the line, that's success. This allows for a more liberal definition of success, and that person can understand that they can do that, even with small errors. And when targeting a line or a dot like this, I can, again, define success as any part of your shoe touching that yellow dot is success. So don't worry about it if it's not perfect. And so the perception of success is incredibly important. So how would we change the perception of how difficult something is? Well, I'll ask you a question. Which of these orange circles is larger? The one on the right with the small blue circles around it, or the one on the left? How about now? This is known as the Ebbinghaus Illusion, and it's actually been studied in golfing, and other types of targeting. You see, they took two groups of people and they had them putt a golf ball towards the orange circle on the right or the orange circle on the left. And the group that putted towards the orange circle on the right with a little blue circles around it actually did much better in their performance. But that's not the most incredible part. The great part is when they took the circles away the next day, that same group still did better than the other group. And when they backed them up and had them putt from a farther distance, they still did better. This means that when we have that success in the beginning, that enhances the feeling and the confidence that we can do that. We get that surge of dopamine in our brain, and we learn to do things better. First success, then progress. We can use illusions in multiple different ways. This is called the Delboeuf Illusion, similar to the other one, where if we put them right next to each other, the circle on the right, the dark circle on the right, looks slightly larger than the other one. We can observe others and our peers doing the same task. And this is where group therapy really has its benefits. Because when we see other people in our situation being successful, it can urge us on and give us the confidence that we can be successful too. We can use social comparable feedback. This is incredible. Actually stating that your peers did well on a given task can increase that confidence and self-efficacy and improve learning and performance. That means if I got Mr. Jones on a treadmill and asked him to put his hand over his head like this and said, Mr. Jones, people with your type of stroke and in your situation actually do really well on this task. That actually gives him that dopamine surge and gives him that confidence to do better. And when people are doing better than average, they should know about it, because feedback from us stating that you're doing better than your peers actually gives us, again, that surge, because that expectation of reward helps us in our brain. Because feedback is rarely neutral. It almost always has a motivational consequence, whether it be on performance, enjoyment, or even automatic movement. And so when we give feedback, we want to give success-focused, positive feedback. Stop focusing on the errors. Don't do this, don't step like that. That's all people will remember. Focusing on success has been proven to improve balance, running efficiency, force production, and of course, increase the dopamine response. So instead of focusing on those errors, I might say, here's 3 things you did great in that exercise, right? And if I want that person to start scanning, to have their brain conditioned to focus on those successes, I might sit them down after an exercise and say, what are 2 things that were successful about that exercise? Doing this repeatedly helps condition the brain to find those successful things and again, enhance our expectations for future success. So to enhance our expectations for future success, we want to use measurement as a tool to show progress. We can define success with those liberal definitions. Don't forget, the perception of success is more important than actual success. We can use an illusion to decrease the perception of difficulty, and we can observe others doing a similar task or use social comparable feedback. We can use and we want to use positive success-focused feedback. Stop focusing on the errors. Those are the 3 parts of the optimal motor learning theory, and each one can help automatic movement improve. But here's the great part. If you combine any 2 of them, you actually get even better effects. And if you combine all 3, you can actually get the best effect. This means that each one of these uses a different pathway in our brain. And that means that if I ask somebody to walk to a mark, I let them pick the color of the mark they're walking to and let them know that people in their situation did really well on this exercise. That's a triple play. And they can have the most ideal conditions for success, performance, and learning. But there was one more thing we were going to talk about. Dual tasking. Dual tasking has to do with attention. It's defined as simply doing 2 different things at the same time. And when it comes to attention, boy, we tell people a lot of times, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention to this, pay attention to that. Yet if we're using too much attention, if something requires too much attention, like if I have to focus on every single step I take everywhere I go, that decreases my capacity to pay attention to other things. That means that I might not be able to plan for obstacles in the future when I see them, or I might get distracted very easily, or I might hear a noise, turn my head and fall over. And having a high attention or a high cost of attention on something can be dangerous. So lowering our attention, it's in our best interest, and it makes things more automatic. Excuse me, lowering our cost of attention of the task. So why dual task? Why would we do two things at once? Well, when we dual task, it actually requires the brain to push one task into a different section of the brain to make sure that that task starts to require less attentional demand. When something requires less attention, it becomes more automatic. And it's important to let people know that when we do dual tasks, when I ask somebody to stand on one leg and count backwards from by sevens from 200, that performance should go down. This is called dual task interference. That means each task consumes a certain amount of our attention and our working memory. Attention is what our brain takes in, and working memory is how our brain makes sense of it. When those two tasks exceed our own capacity, well, we start screwing up, and that's okay. We want to let people know that that's going to happen in advance. So what are some things that can be dual tasked? Well, we can walk and count backwards by 3s and 7s. We can spell words backwards, 5 to 6 letter words, preferably. We can balance and have a conversation, or walk on a treadmill and be given 10 words to remember. A few minutes later, we can try and repeat them back. We can negotiate obstacles while sorting cards, or do repeated sit to stands while throwing and catching. We can dance and name things in a category. I can say, name as many vegetables as you can name, or name as many NFL football teams as you can. Or we can walk and try even using our cell phone. We've all seen videos of people walking and texting, sometimes having that dual task interference and falling right into a fountain. Dual tasking is an excellent way to lower that cost of attention, and that's the point. But optimal, and the real point here is that optimal conditions can be achieved using external focus, our sense of autonomy by using choice, and enhancing our expectations for future success. That can improve performance, learning, motor efficiency, and help us to gain a higher skill level in less time. All of this can help to improve automatic movement. This automatic movement is something that we take for granted every day. And it's not just about doing it over and over again until it becomes automatic. We can create those ideal conditions, and we can decrease the attentional cost. It works. It doesn't just work in rehab. It works in all these different things and more. It's been studied in all these different sports. But don't take my word for it. Take the 2 decades and hundreds of research studies that have been peer-reviewed and proven this over that time. So use it. Patients, change your focus. Measure your success. Family members, caregivers, change our cues. Focus on success and give choices. They don't need to matter what type of choice it is. Let's give that choice to improve that autonomy. Medical professionals, we can adapt our approach. We can do the same thing with slight adaptations to get better responses. And coaches and athletes, we can grade our activities to change our focus. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your Saturday morning to come and learn about restoring automatic movement. If you have any questions, I'd love to take them now. And if you don't feel comfortable, you can feel free to email me right here. Our website right here is Audia Physical Therapy, and there's weekly blog articles on neurological physical therapy. Feel free to stop by. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, Matt. Much appreciated. We appreciate having you here. And if anybody has any questions, we can entertain those now.
Absolutely, absolutely, and much less boring, I would have to say, and much less boring. However, what I've noticed is that when using a metronome, you can actually practice short distances walking with a metronome, and that can help you to have that beat in there and improve that consistency of that beat. When you use the music, you have to be really consistent about finding which beat and which one works for you. Some songs are a little slower, some songs are a little faster. The great part about the metronome is that if you find that you're screwing up at too fast of a speed, you can adjust the speed of that. by very small increments. And that helps you to find success really quickly. And you can actually measure it as well. So we have some patients that walk at 40 beats per minute for an exercise, and we won't have them do it everywhere they go. We'll just have them do it for short periods of time. And then next week, maybe they're walking at 50 beats per minute, right? And they can start to improve that speed and that consistency.
Okay.
It's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. This is a really great question. Her question was, does this have to be used very closely to the injury? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. We can create those ideal conditions, we can dual task, and we can create improvement at any point after an injury. There is actually no window for recovery on something like this. All right. So creating ideal conditions, dual tasking, lowering our cost of attention can be used at any point in time, whether we're healthy or we have injuries, whether it was close to the injury or whether it's 25 years out, it still works. I mean, it's impossible to separate the brain from the body. And we know that now. We know that even seemingly little things like just changing 2 words and how we say something can actually change our brain and our movement and our performance. A lot of times when we have that little stumble, right? Oh man, suddenly that can change our focus internally. And then it starts snowballing into more difficulty and more difficulty. It decreases our confidence, right? And that's where training with walking and doing other things like walking and thinking about something, walking and having a conversation, doing these types of dual task things that can initially decrease our performance can be really useful later on. Because what happens is our brain actually unconsciously sees these things up ahead and plans for them. We don't realize it, but when we're walking towards a door, as we're getting closer to the door, our brain is actually making certain adjustments, getting ready to grab the door, open the door, and push it open, whatever we have to do. And all these things are automatically happening. We're not saying, here comes the door, I better turn my foot and adjust my leg and then get ready to reach, and how heavy is the door, right?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. We're located right here in Carlsbad, California. So,
that's great.
Yeah, we're right on the north side of Palomar Airport right here.
Wonderful.
You can find our location at Audia Physical Therapy or audiapt.com.
Right.
But I can give you the address if you have a pen right now.
Sure.
Sure.
Go ahead.
5963 La Place Court in Carlsbad, Suite 109.
Okay, great.
We're open Monday through Friday, and you can give us a call anytime too. Well, I think it might actually go back to something as early as 1985 and something called the expectancy theory. A lot of us know this as the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If you believe you can do it, then your thoughts and your actions start to align with that. And so as a therapist, if we don't believe somebody can get better, boy, you shouldn't be working with that therapist, right? If he says, well, we'll see what happens, but I don't think you're going to get much better, you should probably get rid of that therapist, because that therapist doesn't actually have that expectation that you can get better. In terms of dealing with a positive mindset, well, we can have a positive mindset in a whole lot of ways. It can change we can use a positive mindset for feedback, for focusing on success, for looking at the ways that we're actually succeeding, or we can have that positive mindset of just saying, hey, we can do this, and being encouraging. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use that. These are just probably a few ways that we can use that. But understanding that the way we feel really matters. Not only the way that a patient feels, but the way the therapist feels, the person you're working with, the way your family member feels, the way your caregiver feels, right? Those things matter, because the way that we speak to people and the way that we feel actually affects our brain and can actually affect our movement, our performance, and our learning. Your speech is great. I appreciate it. What Mary's talking about actually can actually condition our brain to be able to search out those successes. It's actually the reason why when we read too much news or we watch too much news, we get all these bad things, and then we look out in the world and we say, boy, the world is a really screwed up place. But then when we calm down on the news, right? And we start just looking around, we realize there's a lot of good things going on in the world. So simply conditioning ourselves with a few positive things, or focusing on our successes repeatedly over a period of time. It's actually been studied that focusing on 2 to 3 things that you're grateful for over 3 weeks can condition your brain to find those things and see those things. For example, there's a great example of this. We needed to replace a tree in our front yard, and we asked the neighbor which tree we wanted to. Hey, we're going to use this tree, and they said, "Well, I haven't seen that tree yet." And I said, "Well, our neighbor has it over there." And she says, "Okay." And so about 2 weeks later, she says, "Matt," she says, "ever since you pointed out that tree, I see that tree everywhere. I see the tree on the side of the street. I see it over here. I saw it, and it's in that person's yard over there all the time. I'd never even seen it." Well, because you're looking for it now you see it. That's how our brain works. It's amazing. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
And anyone else, if they have more questions, or if they even like to just call me, our phone number, if anybody would like to take it down, I'll wait a second, so see if anybody can get a pen. Our phone number is 760-652-3739. 760-652-3739.
If you, Matt said he'd be willing to share these slides, you could always email me at sdbif.org, or you can email, Matt here at this email address, I'm sure. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time here with us on a Saturday morning. And Dr. Audia, round of applause for you. We always appreciate having you here. Appreciate your insight. And we'll probably keep talking to you about maybe 2022 as well, having you at a group. We just love your insight on these things. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Well, we're going to end this meeting. I think with my Zoom issues this morning, Stephanie is somewhere in here, and she's our host, not me as usual. So Stephanie will be ending the meeting, but I'll be Xing out. And thank you so much. You all have a wonderful weekend. Make the best of this weekend. We appreciate you all.